The Los Angeles Times column, "A new generation of smug American expats in Mexico needs to face the truth." Huh. I wonder what that truth is. Under the image here, we see in Mexico City, Tyler Hansbrough, second from the left, has led an Airbnb experience called Tyler's Taco Tours since before the pandemic. Good for him. Thank you all for stopping by and supporting my work. Please remember to like, comment, share, subscribe. Make sure that you're still subscribed, and let's dive into this article. There are some things in this article that I definitely wanted to point out because the LA Times, of course, is being hypocritical. Why is the LA Times being hypocritical? Because they are 100% woke. The dusty truck bounced along the narrow streets of Guamaluque. I'm going to call it Guamaluque, the village in Mexican state of Zacatecas, where my father was born. It darted in front of vacant homes, slowed past the church, and finally stopped in front of Rancho Sol's corner store. There I stood alongside my dad and a group of older men. What was left of Guadalupe's population, since nearly everyone else had left for East Los Angeles and the San Fernando Valley decades earlier. Yeah, and we should have kicked them out. I've lived in the San Fernando Valley when I first moved to California. That's where I lived. We eyed the man who slowly emerged from the pickup, middle-aged, white, wearing sunglasses, a polo shirt, jeans, and a smile. He asked in broken Spanish to no one in particular whether there were any houses for sale. Everyone was so bewildered at the sight of a capacho in a tiny hamlet up in the mountains of central Mexico that we stayed silent for a bit. Then came the chorus of polite but firm no. I asked in English what he was doing so far from the United States. "I want to move here," said the man, who never gave his name. "It's too expensive back home. Maybe you don't live in California?" Unprompted, he went on to complain about liberalism, about how the U.S. was a failed country, and how he wanted to spend his retirement in peace. He asked if we knew of any houses for sale in Juarez. You think that Mexico is a successful country? I mean, it's right here. The U.S. is a failed country. About liberalism. Okay, what are you talking about liberalism? Are you talking about an acceptance of all peoples? Yeah, because they don't have that in Mexico. They don't like the capachos or the gringos or, those people who aren't Hispanic, so to speak. The man got back into his truck and rumbled off. Didn't even say gracias. Yeah, he's a terrible human being. He didn't even say gracias. Although the encounter happened 22 years ago, I can remember that ugly American like it happened yesterday in my front yard. Ooh, that ugly American. You mean kind of like what Americans say about Hispanic people coming to the United States? But we're not allowed to say that because it's not politically correct. It's so rude. It's so racist. It's so evil. It's so wrong. Yet the Hispanics are allowed to say that about Americans. Anytime even my own friends talk about relocating to a foreign country because the U.S. is just too much, the image of that guy's smug countenance and his expectation that a dying town would welcome him always pops into my mind. Yeah, well, we don't. See, we're supposed to welcome the people coming in from foreign countries into this country here in the United States, but the people in Mexico don't have to. They're not under any obligation to. I tell my friends to not succumb to this most American of religions, one seemingly more popular than ever. It's figurative pews filled with disciples, both conservative and liberal, young and old, but all with the money to move. In Portugal, my colleague, Jawid Kalim, found former residents of the Golden State lapping up the Mediterranean nation's temperate climate and taking advantage of the economic situation in the country, one of the poorest in Europe. This week, my colleague, Kate Linthicum, filed a similar dispatch from Mexico City. Yeah, I mean, it's expensive in California. It's expensive in the United States compared to other parts of the world. If you're getting a guaranteed income from something, say you're making $3,000 a year, you can go to Mexico and be fine. I mean, not $3,000 a year, $3,000 a month. You can go to a lot of these other countries in the world and live well off of that level of income. There are people who they're dual disabled income from the military, and they're making like $5,500, $6,000 a month between the two of them. They can easily go to a foreign country and live really, really well, whereas here in the United States, it might not be as nice as you like it. But part of the problem is a lot of these people are coming out of places like New York City, the state of California. They're living in these really expensive places. Move to Montana. You're going to be able to live pretty well there in the United States. In both places, natives have loudly complained that these new Americans are pricing them out of their homes and not bothering to learn local mores and traditions. Jawid and Kate documented protests against the newcomers through internet shaming campaigns and pleas for local governments to intervene. At the very least, argued the long-timers, Americans should understand their presence doesn't automatically improve the life of wherever they happen to be. This is what I am saying about these people immigrating to the United States. My life is not better. I live in a complex here, in an apartment, of 40 units. More than 30 of the units are occupied exclusively by Hispanic people. I deal with them on a regular basis. They do not make my life better. The city I live in is 40% Hispanic. They do not make my life better. They come here with different ideas, with different ways of doing things, different customs, and it interrupts my life to a great degree. The response from many of the Americans Jawed and Kate interviewed, not just indifference, but defiance. Things were just becoming too much back home. But I didn't want to leave everything about LA behind. Why would you be in LA, period? LA is a shithole. I am not exaggerating. It is. You can talk to people that live here where I live outside of LA, and they're like, yeah, LA is a shithole. Everybody will agree with you. One transplant told Jawed about Portugal, adding, we could keep the parts we liked and leave the rest, as if navigating society is as simple as changing shoes. It reminds me of being in a more friendly, more clean at times Brooklyn, another told Kate of Mexico City, as if one of the world's great metropolises is no better than a New York borough. No, I can't imagine that New York City, or the Mexico City is great. How could it be? It's overpopulated, it's crowded, it's dirty, it's smelly. I've never been there, but that's been my experience with big cities when I go to them. So, the ugly American trope is nothing new, of course. See, the ugly American trope is, it's fine for these people to say that. So-called snowbirds long ago turned San Miguel de Allende in Guanajuato, and this other place in Guerrero into south of the border suburbs of Leisure World. New York hipsters have long haunted Mexico City as much as they do Los Angeles. Okay? Half of middle-class San Diego seems to have retired to an apartment in Rosarito or Ensenada. Are these places in Mexico? I don't know where Ensenada or Rosarito are. Are they in Spain? What is wrong with Americans retiring to these places? It's okay for Hispanic people to come here to this country. Why do you think the Americans are leaving here to go to these other places where, hey, they can be surrounded by Americans and not have to integrate, right? They're living in these Rosarito and Ensenada where they're in communities that they're surrounded by other Americans. They don't have to deal with the locals. It's the same thing when these foreigners come here to the United States. They want to be around their own kind. They don't want to be around people like me, but we're forcing people to integrate, and you know, it's what people don't want. People don't want to integrate. They want to have their customs, their traditions with the high standard of living in the United States. That's what they want. I have no issue with people who leave their homelands for a better life elsewhere, via con Dios and all that. But that's not what happens with this new generation of expats. They're emblematic of the type of people I call California quitters. Privileged people who want all the easy and none of the hard and decamp for what they think is the better life at the slightest hint of inconvenience. Yeah, it's the slightest hint of inconvenience, believe me. Living in LA is a nightmare. Don't live there. It's terrible. Living in California I'm sick of it. That they ended up in foreign countries and living large while their new neighbors struggle is terrible, yet so apropos for this type. Okay? And they're completely different from immigrants. Really? Are they? Because that's what it seems like they are to me. They're immigrants. Which some of these expats insist that they are. They are. They're immigrants. What are you talking about? But the difference between the two seemingly similar groups are as varied as those of a refugee and a tourist. Expats have the financial capital to chase the good life. Immigrants never can. Are you sure about that? There are people who come to the United States who have a lot of money, and they come from other countries and want to live here in the United States. Expats know that if they fail, the cushion of their home country will break the fall. Immigrants know there's no turning back, so must plunge ahead. Yeah, see, the thing is immigrants don't have to come here, and immigrants think this is the only option. And it turns out for a lot of them, it's not the best option. They could have just stayed where they were or stayed in a country closer to their own. That happens a lot. I've known people, they come here and they don't like it and they want to go back home. So expats can move whenever and wherever they want. Immigrants can't. Expats connect to the countries they live in the most superficial ways and add little to it. Immigrants become part of their new homeland and fundamentally alter its course. They do not become part of the new homeland. They do fundamentally alter its course. They want to maintain their sovereignty from their home nation, and then they want to change the country that they move to. People are being forcibly displaced from the United States by economics. If you want to live in Los Angeles, you got to be making $5,000 a month minimum. That's after taxes, just to make ends meet. So if you decide to move there and you get some like low-paying job, maybe it's a part-time job and you're making $20,000 a year, you can't survive on your own. You have to have roommates. You might be 3 people in a 2-bedroom apartment. That's not fun. Felix pointed out that Americans coming in with their money fundamentally change local economies, making them more dependent on dollars that can easily flee in what he calls an extractive industry. But what's even more tone deaf, Felix argues, is that these new residents skip through Mexico in a mobile cocoon that largely protects them from the real world around them. Oh, it's so terrible. These foreigners come in and ruin our country. That never happens in America. The surrounding areas and permanent residents are hit hard by violence and poverty. Oh, yeah, okay. Okay. Why are you not calling this out in the United States? Why are you not calling this out here? Because you're creating serf classes. You're taking away jobs from Americans who want those jobs. There's none of this, oh, they're doing jobs Americans don't want to do. No, that's not true. That is not true. Americans would take those jobs in a second. A lot of these jobs that these Hispanics do were jobs that teenagers were doing in the United States. Expats are immune to that. Oh, yeah, they're immune to the violence, But I'm not immune to the violence here in this country. I have to deal with it. It's playing the game of life on someone else's server with cheat codes. Yep, that's exactly what it is when the immigrants come here. It's a privilege afforded to American expats and allowed, but they should at least be honest about their hell of an advantage. Yeah, it's always the evil whiteys. These evil whiteys, because they're not talking about Hispanics that are repatriating themselves back to their Hispanic countries. They're talking about white Americans going down there. Let's take a look here. We have another article from American Renaissance on this. Californians and other Americans are flooding Mexico City. Some locals want them to go home. I would say that a lot of locals probably want them to go home. Fernando Bustos Gorospe, was sitting with friends in a cafe here when he realized that, once again, they were outnumbered. We're the only brown people, said Bustos, a 38-year-old writer and university professor. We're the only people speaking Spanish except the waiters. Oh no, heaven forfend. Why are people not complaining about this happening in the United States? There are places where I can go, where I've been, where I was the only white person, where I was the only person who could speak English. It's okay when it happens in the United States, but it's not okay when it happens in Mexico. I don't think that the American Renaissance thinks that the situation in the United States with immigration is okay, by the way. They're just making an article about this. Mexico has long been the top foreign travel destination for Americans. Its bountiful beaches and picturesque pueblos luring tens of millions of U.S. visitors annually, but in recent years, a growing number of tourists and remote workers hailing from Brooklyn, New York, Silicon Valley, and points in between have flooded the nation's capital and left a scent of new wave imperialism. Oh no, they're being imperialists. They're coming in and taking over the country. That's not happening in the United States at all. I don't have to learn how to speak Spanish to get along in the world anymore. No, what was I thinking? Look, I have no interest in going to Mexico. If people saying here, oh, look, Americans go down there to visit. Hey, look, if you want to go down there, you go ahead. I just watched the movie not that long ago. What was the name of that movie? Get the Gringo. Mel Gibson movie where he goes to prison in Mexico. No, I would not survive. I would be dead in the first day. And it would not be a fun death. Don't go to Mexico, because I would.
They must have kneeled in the wrong place and prayed to the wrong God, because they're being held prisoner by militants of some sort.
Yeah, that's what would happen. The influx, which has accelerated since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic and is likely to continue as inflation rises, is transforming some of the city's most treasured neighborhoods into expat enclaves. Oh no, that never happens in the United States. Oh man. In leafy, walkable quarters such as Roma, Condesa, Centro, and Juarez, rents are soaring as Americans and other foreigners snap up houses and landlords trade long-term renters for travelers willing to pay more on Airbnb, taquerias, corner stores, and fondas. Small family-run lunch spots are being replaced by Pilates studios, co-worker spaces, and sleek cafes advertising oat milk lattes and avocado toast. Oh, so in other words, they're bringing industry and entrepreneurship.
It's a perfectly cromulent word.
To Mexico. They're going to make Mexico economically more viable. Terrible. Unlike what we're constantly told in this country, that the foreigners coming in here are making the United States more economically viable, which is not true. That's actually happening in Mexico. And English. Well, it's everywhere, ringing out at supermarkets, natural wine bars, and fitness classes in the park. Now, that's something that I can understand. If these immigrants from the United States are not learning to speak the local language of the country that they move to, that's wrong. I mean, I would expect anybody moving to this country to learn how to speak English. I think that any country that supports more than one language is doing it wrong. That's right, Canada. You're doing it wrong. Everybody should be speaking one language in your country. At Laredo, a Mediterranean restaurant where on any given night, 3/4 of the tables are filled with foreigners, A Mexican man in a well-cut suit recently took a seat at the bar, gazed at the English language menu before him, and sighed as he handed it back. A menu in Spanish, please? Well, if he's from Mexico, what's he doing in the Mediterranean? Did he go to Spain? Did he go to a different country where, hey, you know, there's going to be a lot of English-speaking tourists? Some Chilangos, as locals are known, are fed up. Recently expletive-laced posters appeared around town. New to the city? Working remotely? They read in English? You're a effing plague, and the locals effing hate you. Leave. There should be an exclamation point at the end of that sentence. If you wrote something like that in the United States, yeah, you would get in trouble. But I'd seen, you know, it's freedom of speech. We have freedom of speech here, but we're not allowed to say that to these people that are moving into the country and taking it over. BS, if you ask me. We should be able to post the same posters. And much worse. Clear financial incentives are drawing Americans to Mexico City, where the average local salary is $450 a month. For the cost of $2,000, one bedroom in Koreatown, an Angelino can rent a penthouse in Mexico City. The dynamic playing out here is, in many ways, an old world problem colliding with tech age mobility, one that is forcing Mexico to confront its own history and traits. After his revelation at the cafe, Bustos uploaded a video to his popular TikTok account complaining that the influx of foreigners in Mexico City stinks of modern colonialism. Of course. And that's the truth, don't you know? That's all that white people know how to do, is colonize other countries and other peoples. Nearly 2,000 people posted comments in agreement. It doesn't feel like colonialism at all when I am inundated with Hispanic people coming to my country, forcing me to speak their language, forcing me to adopt their customs, treating me as if I'm an idiot and not following the laws of my own country. His critique is multi-layered and speaks to generations of injustices. There's the problem of newcomers' indifference as to how their actions are affecting locals. Yep, you're right. Newcomers never affect locals here in the United States. But also the fact that Mexicans cannot migrate to the U.S. Yes, they can, and they do. Millions of them every single year with the same ease. Oh, yeah, okay. It's easier, actually, because all I have to do is walk across the border. He also believes that Americans, many of whom are white, imagine that. Why am I not surprised? Are reinforcing the city's pervasive, if infrequently discussed, caste system. Well, whose fault is it you have a caste system? We don't have a caste system here in the United States. So how are they reinforcing this caste system? Indigenous Mexicans are more likely to be poor than lighter-skinned Mexicans and are largely unrepresented in film, television, and advertisements. A growing social movement called Brown Power has demanded that Netflix, HBO, and other streaming platforms feature dark-skinned actors. So it's your own fault. You're racist in your own country. Oh, I thought that Mexicans weren't racist. That only white people could be racist. But there it is. Plain as day. They call it a caste system because they can't possibly be racist, could they? Mexico is classist and racist. Oh, there you go. Finally, somebody's saying it. Bustos said, people with white skin are given preference. Okay. Now, if a local wants to go to a restaurant or a club, they don't just have to compete with rich white Mexicans, but with foreigners too. The flood of American visitors began in earnest around 2016 when the New York Times named Mexico City the world's top travel destination. The magazine writers wondered whether it was the new Berlin. The pandemic pushed it into overdrive. As much as Europe and Asia shut their doors to Americans in 2020, Mexico, which adopted few COVID-19 restrictions, was one of the few places where gringos were welcome. Making it easier, Americans have long been able to stay here up to 6 months without a visa. The State Department says there are 1.6 million U.S. citizens living in Mexico. Although it doesn't know how many are based in the capital, Mexican census data track only foreigners who have arrived for residency, and most remote workers don't. But the anecdotal evidence is compelling. In the first 4 months of the year, 1.2 million foreigners arrived in Mexico City's airport. Alexandra Demo, who runs the location company Welcome Home Mexico, said she gets 50 calls a week from people contemplating a move. We're just seeing Americans flooding in, she said. It's people who may have their own business, or maybe they're thinking of starting some consulting or freelance work. They don't even know how long they're going to stay. They're completely picking up their entire lives and just moving down here. Yep. So this is a problem. How come people are not complaining about this in the United States? People are picking up their lives and moving here to the United States. Lauren Rodwell, 40, also moved down in January after spending several months here last year. A marketer who works a tech job that is remote, she was tired of living in San Francisco, where every conversation began with, what do you do? Okay, so what are the conversations like in Mexico? I want to know that then. I like being in vibrant cities that have multiple cultures that mix well, where there's good food and good energy and dancing and art, she said. It reminds me of being in a more friendly, more clean, at times, Brooklyn. Well, you're coming from San Francisco. That's just horrifying. They actually have to clean human feces off the streets there. Rodwell, who is black, says she doesn't feel guilty. I kind of feel like, as a person of color from America, I'm so economically disadvantaged that wherever I go and experience some advantage or equality, I take it, she said. Okay, then stay in Mexico. In Mexico, which has a relatively small population of Afro-Mexicans and abolished slavery decades before its northern neighbor, Rodwell said she does not experience the same racism as she does in the U.S. Being black in America, she said, is exhausting. It's nice to take a break from it. I'm sure it's just awful here. Maybe it's all in your mind. Omar Iruzzo, a barista at a coffee shop in Roma, said rent for his apartment in the city's historic center, another place where foreigners are flocking, has more than doubled over the last 5 years. Nearby renters have been pushed out as entire buildings are turned into upscale apartments. Oh no. All these problems we've been dealing with in the United States for years, which has caused all of this racism that this woman is running away from. And now it's coming to you. I feel so sorry for you. Iruzzo said she was sick of feeling like an outsider in his city. Around 60 to 70% of his clients are foreigners, he said. Some people order in English and get mad when I don't understand them. Yeah, that's never happened in the United States. I've never experienced that, where somebody tries to say something in Mexican and I don't understand what they're saying. A chef who had just taken a sheet of warm cookies out of the oven shook his head. That's unfair, he said. If we go to the U.S., we're expected to speak English. Nope, you're not. No, you are fucking not, asshole. The truth is, as you come here and you get away with speaking Spanish, and I have to adjust my life to you, and I'm supposed to address you in Spanish, and you get mad at me if I don't. I've had this experience more than once, so don't even start with me. Let me see. Endless racism, colonialism, etc. mentioned. Now they know how we feel. We get illegal aliens, they get upscale. White leftists who live in Starbucks. Yeah, that's true. They get upscale illegals. We get the lower scale illegals. This is a comment, by the way. I'm just reading a couple comments. Well, here's the kicker. They'll only benefit from our presence, and their society will be the better for it. Yep, that's true. Cloud7 says, my response to Mexico is to play the world's smallest violin for them. Yeah, exactly. These people get it. You know, it's just so ridiculous. These people are complaining that people are coming and bringing industry and economics to their country. And oh my gosh, they all speak English. Yeah, when you come to our country, you're expected to speak English, except every freaking phone call I make, hey, press some number for Spanish. Every single freaking phone call I make. How is that expecting you to speak English? Documents are printed out in English and in Spanish in this country. How is that expecting you to speak English? I'm so mad about that. That's so ridiculous. You're not expected to speak English in this country anymore. It is horrifying to me. A country should have one language. If you want to do business in that country, you should speak that language. Look, I understand people come, they go visit other countries. I've visited 2 other countries that didn't speak the language of either one of those countries. I'm not saying that that's not okay. What I'm saying is if I were to move to either one of those countries, I better damn well speak that language, at least enough to get by, if not fluently. Anyway, thank you for watching. I'm so glad that the world is finally experiencing real problems that they didn't experience before. Please remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.